In the early years of the 18th century, two writers became the best of friends. One was a brilliantly witty English Catholic, Alexander Pope.
And the other, an acerbic Irish Protestant, Jonathan Swift.
This man's words, I honestly believe, will last forever. Alexander.
Do you know what he needs? A big mad pal!
Across 3 decades, their friendship inspired poems and prose that were savagely funny.
His illness was surprisingly relieved by a plentiful fetid stool.
And sometimes simply savage.
Aye, not bad.
Heralding a golden age of satire.
A young, healthy child is at a year old a most delicious, nourishing and wholesome food, whether stewed, roasted, baked or boiled.
And I'm proud to be an Okie from Waikiki. With my travelling companion, the crime writer Denise Mina, we're going to follow in their footsteps.
We'll go to London and see if we can stalk them.
You leaks, I don't know the way to London by foot.
Together we'll explore these wickedly satirical writers whose cutting words revolutionised English literature and continue to inspire today.
British satirists still think that you can make a difference by making a joke.
It's like the zombie apocalypse, but it's poets.
In 1725, in his house by the river at Twickenham, Alexander Pope was having a difficult time.
Can I read you one of Pope's couplets?
Oh, please do.
No, you'll like this. This is from his essay on criticism. One science only will one genius fit. So vast is art, so narrow human wit. And what he's saying is, stick to what you know. If you're brilliant at something, it'll just be one thing. So don't get tempted into trying other stuff.
But Pope had failed to take his own advice. For the last 10 years, he'd been translating Homer's epic poems and editing a new version of Shakespeare's plays.
Just to give you a little flavour of Pope's Shakespeare, 1,560 lines are relegated to the bottom of the page because Pope doesn't think they're good enough. He thinks Shakespeare's better than that. All the puns go to the bottom of the page. Oh. He puts it out and it sells pretty well. But then an academic called Louis Theobald brings out a book called Shakespeare Restored.
Theobald's book absolutely slaughtered Pope's Shakespeare. Leave this sort of thing to real editors, it said. You don't know what you're doing.
It's about empire building with Theobald and Pope, isn't it? It's about get out of this playground, you don't go to this school.
Yes.
But how do you feel when you get bad reviews?
It utterly breaks my heart.
Yeah.
This was a second blow to Pope's self-esteem. He'd recently been attacked for hiring other poets to help translate Homer's Odyssey.
What he really needs is something to cheer him up.
Do you know what he needs? A big mad pal! And Jonathan Swift's coming to visit.
Hurrah!
The 1726 reunion was huge, returning them to the happy days of 1714, when they'd been members of the Scriblerus Club, sharing satirical sketches and mocking the world. So this is the very first visit that Swift makes back from Dublin, 1726, and he comes over.
They hadn't seen each other in person for 12 years. That must have been pretty exciting for both of them.
But they've been writing to each other incessantly. They're excited, they're nervous, who knows what's going to happen?
They basically want to put together an outtakes tape of all the stuff they wrote in the old days, when they were the Scriblerians.
Scriblerians.
The Fab Four were back together. Pope, Swift and their friends John Gay and John Arbuthnot. They do a lot of carousing, a lot of socialising, as you do when a mate who lives abroad
Big
comes.
time.
Everybody wants to see him. I mean, that must have been great.
Swift had a surprise for his friends to read. A manuscript snappily entitled Travels into Several Remote Nations of the World by Lemuel Gulliver. Everyone now knows it better as Gulliver's Travels. In its 4 books, Gulliver visits 4 different parts of the world. But it's Lilliput that people always think of first, where Gulliver wakes up to find he's been tied up by hundreds of tiny little people. He becomes a part of Lilliput society, serving its royal family.
So this is him as big man
This
in a
is
little
him.
world.
He's Gigantosaurus here.
A bit like we are now.
He gets arrested for the following crime. Her Imperial Majesty's apartment was on fire by the carelessness of a maid of honour who fell asleep while she was reading a romance. Doesn't like romances, right? He's getting that in, little dig. By the luckiest of chance, I had not discharged myself of any part of the wine I had the night before, and the heat I had contracted by coming very near to the flames and labouring to quench them made the wine begin to operate by urine, which I voided in such a quantity and applied...
Operate by urine sounds like a new perfume, doesn't it? Operate by urine.
which I voided in such a great quantity and applied so well to the proper places that in 3 minutes the fire was wholly extinguished. And the rest of that noble pile, which had cost so many ages in building, preserved from destruction.
What I love about it is that no one has a small piss in Swift.
No
It's
one.
always a great
Giant.
torrent.
In Book 2, Gulliver finds himself amongst the giants of Brobdingnag.
It's got that thing that when he's massive, he's able to see society, if you like. He can stand back and see all that. And when he's small, he sees humanity and how sort of animalistic it is.
And how disgusting they are.
Yeah.
He's looking at people's skin, and because they're gigantic, he can see fleas crawling across them, and it's disgusting, and he thinks they're all incredibly ugly. And then he goes to the land of the humans. I don't know how to say that.
No, someone once told me that when you say humanim, because I've always said humanim, you're supposed to actually sort of make a horse, almost kind of. But I'd just love you to do that for this entire conversation. The horse people.
The horse people. So when he goes there, they are totally rational, and he becomes disgusted with humanity.
The Houyhnhnms keep livestock called Yahoos, creatures that look very human but can't speak. Even so, the Yahoos' primitive society somehow mirrors English court politics.
They are really the rough end of humanity.
Planet of the Apes.
Yeah.
But it's a way of talking about contemporary politics without being done for treason, and it's also it's very, very funny. This leader usually had a favourite, like himself as he could get, whose employment was to lick his master's feet and posteriors and drive the female Yahoos to his kennel, for which he was now and then rewarded with a piece of ass's flesh. I love the random capitalisation as well. I'm going to start doing that. The favourite is hated by the whole herd and therefore protects himself, always keeping near the person of his leader. He usually continues in office until a worse can be found, but at the very moment he is discarded, his successor at the head of all the Yahoos in the district, young, old, male and female, come in a body and discharge their excrements upon him from head to foot. How far this might be applicable to our courts and favourites and ministers of state, my master said I could best determine.
When Gulliver finally leaves their country, he does so in a canoe made from Yahoo skins, its gaps plugged with Yahoo tallow. Yahoos that have been melted down.
One of the horrible moments for me in the whole book is he spent the time with these symbols of reason, and that's what these horses represent. And you realise it's a cold, inhuman thing that he thinks is so marvellous. And you realise that if you're around reason that much, if you give up on these horrible neighbours, this humanity, this sort of animalism, what you go to completely makes you a cold, amoral being who doesn't really care anymore. And he never tells us that. It just oozes out of gaps in the text all the time, just like that Yahoo tallow.
Gulliver's Travels has been in print ever since it was first published, but the Victorians found it misanthropic and offensive, and for years it was printed as a children's book, with all of its satirical darkness and the dirty bits removed. Only in the 20th century was it widely republished as Swift had written it. Cartoonist Martin Rowson loved that darkness enough to do an updated version, but he believes Swift has been profoundly misunderstood.
So you don't think he was misanthropic?
We know that he was beloved of his friends. They used to light bonfires on his birthday in Dublin for years and years and years.
And
ring the bells because they loved him so much. Yeah. It's the constant problem with the satirist, and I speak as a satirist, is that they confuse what we depict with what we believe. Mm-hmm. So he shows Gulliver's misanthropy, and they think that Swift, in depicting this, is advocating it, which of course he's not. So people say, how can you do such horrible drawings? You must be a horrible person. I say, no, I'm not actually. I'm outraged. That's why I'm doing these drawings of these people in horrible ways. Yeah. And he was doing the same thing.
That's funny, actually, because as a crime writer, people always say to you, you seem quite jolly for a crime writer. You're not currently trying to murder me. What's the deal with that?
I always get people saying, I know behind it all, you're very depressed. No. That's just Tony Hancock, that's it.
Yeah. Swift is engaging with things at a certain level which people have forgotten about. That everybody's saying, well, he's a terrible misanthrope, he's gone completely mad, he hates all of humanity. No. That's exactly the opposite of what Swift is about. He's like Hogarth, my great hero Hogarth, who, unlike most of their contemporaries, when they walked around a corner in a street in London, wading through gutters full of shit and would see a child being publicly executed for stealing a bun, Swift and Hogarth were horrified. Everybody else just walked by.
The summer of 1726 not only delivered a first glimpse of Gulliver's Travels. One evening, when Swift and Pope were in the house in Twickenham, Swift saved something that would become Pope's next great work.
Pope takes out this thing, which is the first draft of a poem that's going to go on to be the Dunciad, one of Pope's seminal works. Decides that is not going to work. He's just about to throw it in the fire, and Swift says, hold on, let's have a look at that. And Swift says, no, it's good, this, I like this. And of course, it's a sort of biting, vicious satire.
Of course he likes it.
So it's so far up Swift's strata, he will not let it go to the flame. Pope had been unable to decide who should be the poem's hero, the king of the dunces. But Swift knew exactly who it should be.
Does Pope say that Swift chose Theobald?
He said he suggests him, yeah.
God, right.
Because you can imagine he arrives and says to Pope, how's it going? And he says, this bloke's written a book about my Shakespeare. So it's kind of perfect. Swift says, I know, just a bloke for you to tear apart. For a treat, we're going to read the Dunciad in Marble Hill House, a mile or so from Pope's home, owned by a good friend of his. Pope and Swift both came and partied here. Pope first published the Dunciad anonymously in 1728. The title page claimed it had been printed in Ireland. It wasn't true. Pope was trying to create a confusion that he could exploit.
It's like saying somebody stole my sex tape, but here's me actually having sex in good lighting.
Perfect.
Do you know what I mean?
One of my favourite Samuel Johnson quotes is that he said in his Life of Pope that Pope never drank tea without a stratagem. And Pope is always up to something.
This deliberately dodgy first publication allowed Pope to follow up with a new deluxe version, which was packed with extras.
The second version, my favourite version of the Dunciad Variorum, as it's called, is packed with footnotes. I mean, everywhere, and they're brilliant. I love a footnote.
The footnotes remorselessly mock Theobald's pedantry. They take up more of the page than the poem itself.
The Dunciad is about the goddess of dullness and her worshippers, who are all these dull poets. And when Pope says dull, he means boring. He also means rubbish. He also means low morals. It all comes under the dullness thing.
In the Dunciad, dullness has taken over the whole world of literature. The goddess appears to Louis Theobald and crowns him king. She orders games in celebration. First, a race between two publishers, Pope's ex-friend Bernard Lintott and his old nemesis, pirate publisher Edmund Curll.
As they race along, Curll slips in a chamber pot that's been emptied onto the ground full of excrement and urine, but it doesn't slow him down. He falls over, he's covered in this stuff, and it said, renewed by Orger's sympathetic force. This is Curll now, he's covered in the stuff, as oiled with magic juices for the course. Vigorous he rises, he gets up from where he slipped in all this stuff. From the effluvia strong, imbibes new life, and scours and stinks along, repasses Lintott, so he overtakes. Now he's been refreshed by all this excrement, repasses Lintott, vindicates the race, nor heeds the brown dishonours of his face. So then, of course, just to balance things up, there's a pissing contest to see how high you can urinate. Now, Chetwood comes out of nowhere. Chetwood published a poem that had a go at Martha Blount, Pope's friend. So Chetwood is one of the early competitors in the How High Can You Piss competition. First, Chetwood leaned against his lettered post. It rose and laboured to a curve at most. Not great. Not great, his urine. So, who can really urinate high? Could it be Edmund Curll? Yes. He steps up. Not so from shameless Curll, impetuous spread. So I'm guessing he's taken up one of these man-spreading poses. The stream and smoking, the steam, if you like, the stream and smoking flourished o'er his head. Oh. High stuff.
But you know, I mean, everyone has a list of resentments in their head, but the forensic detail in which he goes into quite old resentments is astonishing. I mean, the mentality, you worry for him. It's almost like he's very successful but has forgotten to be happy.
There's a decision you have to make when you read the Dunciad. Is this just spite? Is it just a way of mocking people who aren't as good as you are? Or does Pope genuinely believe that what's happening to the world of letters and to culture in general is a dangerous thing? When he talks about this goddess of dullness, listen to this. He says, she comes, the cloud-compelling power, behold. So there she is. With night primeval and with chaos old. Now that sounds like the beginning of the book of Genesis, when there is chaos and God creates order. She seems to be reversing the process. And this line, light dies before her uncreating word. So let there be light has been reversed. And it ends the poem. He says, thy hand, great dullness, lets the curtain fall, and universal darkness covers all. And I think he's talking about ignorance, the dangers of ignorance.
Is he not just saying it's dumbing down? It wasn't like that in my day.
He's saying it's dumbing down, but in 3 books.
And it was very funny competitions about who can piss highest.
Pope's attack on all the lowbrow literati caused so much offence that he began taking his evening stroll with 2 loaded pistols and Bounce, his Great Dane dog, for protection.
The glorious summer of 1726 came to an end, but Pope was unable to attend Swift's farewell dinner. He was unwell. Swift put pen to paper.
Just listen, because he's not going to say, I love you and I've had a brilliant summer, because that's just not his style.
Because he's Swift.
Because he's Swift. I'm gathering up my luggage and preparing for my journey. I will endeavour to think of you as little as I can, and when I write to you, I'll strive not to think of you. This I intend in return for your kindness. And further, I know nobody has dealt with me so cruelly as you, the consequences of which usage I fear will last as long as my life, for so long as I shall be, in spite of my heart, entirely yours.
I love love expressed begrudgingly.
Yeah.
Makes it more authentic, doesn't it?
Yeah. Do you want to read one?
Oh, yeah, I'll read the response to that. Many a short sigh you cost me the day I left you, and many more you will cost me till the day you return. I really walked about like a man banished, and when I came home, found it no home. That's lovely, isn't it? So it's too simple for Pope almost. When I came home, found it no home.
But it's still poetic.
Of
It's still
course,
turning
yeah.
a phrase, you know?
He's not normally minimalist, though, Pope.
No.
That was. Listen to this. He said that he can't see one seat in my own garden or one room in my own house without a phantom of you sitting or walking before me. When I talk about love in the room, there's love in the envelope with these two.
Yeah.
But love isn't really what these 2 men were known for. Both had a reputation for misanthropy. In Pope's case, the Dunciad became a turning point. For the rest of his career, his output would focus on much more biting satire.
What do you think was Pope's motivation for that move into full-on political and other forms, social satire at the end?
He says, what's he say? I nod in company, I wake at night, fools rush into my head, and so I write. As if he's helpless. So when he's with his friends, he's half asleep because he's up all night writing, but he can't help it, he's compelled. But he's not compelled like a great romantic poet, you know, by the muse, by nature, by inspiration. He's compelled by stupidity. Fools rush into my head, and so I write.
Is there a distinction between the type of satire they're writing? Because I read somewhere that Pope's was wounded vexation and Swift's was far more formed and political. Do you see their satires as different, or...?
I think that Pope kept score. Pope had a kind of book, actually, it's in the British Library now, where he kept a collection of all the nasty things that he found that had been said about him. So he would collect these pamphlets and things written against him, and then he would mark them up, and they were sort of, I would say, a table for future revenges. Right. And a lot of that stuff went into the Dunciad. There's a great story told about Pope, which I think is true, and I think tells you a lot about him, told by the artist and art theorist Richardson, who said he visited Pope in Twickenham, and they were talking about the latest pamphlet that had been written against Pope, and Pope said, "Oh, I've got a collection of these. I take a delight in them." He said, "Let me show you the latest one that I found." And he goes to get it, and as he turns away from the company, Richardson sees crossing his face an expression of the purest agony. Oh. Yeah, and it's a good story, isn't it? Because he's relishing it, but he's hating it, and that's a very Popian thing.
Yeah.
The 1726 visit had been a delight, and in 1727, Swift returned.
So, in my long and varied life, I have found one adage that seems to be forever true, and that is you can't have the same party twice.
That is so true.
If you try it the second time, it never quite works out. During Swift's second visit in 1727, both friends fell ill. Swift returned to Dublin. Pope's letter followed him home. My constitution, too, has had its share of decay, as well as my spirits, and I am as much in the decline at 40 as you at 60. I believe we should be fit to live together could I get a little more health. It's so wouldn't it have been great if they'd have lived together? Really good for this show.
It would have been great for the show because I think they would have murdered each other. I think then that could have been played to my strengths.
See, indeed.
This is a strange way to make your living, isn't it?
I suppose you're wondering why I brought you all here.
By the later 1720s, both Pope and Swift felt ill and old, but they weren't dead yet.
Swift had first attacked how the English ran Ireland in 1720, putting sheep in place of tenant farmers, made those farmers unemployed, and created a surplus of wool that the Irish couldn't possibly use. By 1729, there were beggars everywhere, in town and country. What was to be done? Well, Swift's response was the anonymous, modest proposal.
Oh. So he's writing in a comedy voice of a very prissy economist. It is a great melancholy object to those who walk through this great town or travel in the country when they see the streets and roads and cabin doors crowded with beggars of the female sex, followed by 3, 4 or 6 children all in rags and importuning every passer-by for alms. Right, so then he goes into the economics of it and how many children there are, and this is his suggested solution. Gird yourself. I have been assured by a very knowing American of my acquaintance in London that a young healthy child, well nursed, is at a year old a most delicious, nourishing and wholesome food, whether stewed, roasted, baked or boiled, and I make no doubt that it will equally serve in a fricassee or a ragout. A child will make 2 dishes at an entertainment for friends, and when the family dines alone, the fore or hindquarters will make a reasonable dish, and seasoned with a little pepper or salt will be very good boiled on the 4th day, especially in winter. And then at the end he brings back this voice of the economist who's proposing this, and he says, I profess in the sincerity of my heart that I have not the least personal interest in this endeavour. I have no children by which I can propose to get a single penny, because my youngest being 9 years old and my wife past childbearing.
He's missed the window.
This caused an absolute outrage, and £300 were offered as a reward for finding out who had written this.
But I think the point of it is saying that such is the society now we find ourselves in, that this is quite a modest proposal, because it fits in with the general exploitation, the general lack of compassion, the general cruelty that's being applied to the Irish people.
A modest proposal has provoked debate and disgust ever since it was written.
What do you make of a modest proposal? Do you think he was serious?
No. I don't think Swift meant that we should eat babies. He wasn't serious in that respect. He had a very serious intention. I mean, I think that pamphlet it's concentrated bile, and what's brilliant about it is the attack on the Irish landed elite, the political class, is relentless. So he's serious about exposing the shortcomings of Ireland's rulers. He's not serious about this amazing, monstrous conceit that, you know, we should have some organised system of cannibalism. That's there as an image of the perversity and self-destructiveness of the Irish landed elite. And what's brilliant about it, of course, is it's mixed with this really amiable, reasonable, genial, I think, Jamie Oliver type person. You couldn't dislike him.
I read somewhere that there was an extreme theory that there was cannibalism amongst the Irish. Was he back referring to that, do you think?
Absolutely. That's really important. So the cannibal was the emblem of all savage peoples. This had been said about the ancient Irish, you know, the pre-colonial Irish, the Irish who existed before the English arrived, that they ate their own children. And what his proposal does is take this slur that's been used to denigrate the Irish, the native Irish, and apply it to the landlords, to the descendants of English colonisers, the people who were supposed to civilise the island and its people. So it makes them the savages rather than the ordinary Irish poor.
As the 1730s passed, Swift's letters to Pope complained more and more of deafness, dizziness and memory loss. He had almost ceased to write, he said.
But Pope very much had not. He was deeply engaged in his satirical period. We've come to visit a bust made of Pope in the 1730s. It's the original from which others would be cast or copied.
He looks like he's thinking to me, do you know what I mean? You know that look over there, like, there's a couplet, here comes a couplet.
But you know, I look at that and I think, this is a frail man.
Would you think that, though, if you didn't know about Pope?
Yeah, I think I would, actually, yeah.
Because my first thing I see is he just looks really intelligent.
In 1734, Pope wrote a poem dedicated to his old friend and doctor, John Arbuthnot. Pope had been attacked in print yet again. The epistle would deal both with his attackers and his own celebrity, which led other poets to constantly harass him at home.
Shut the door, good John. John was his Pope's actual servant. Shut the door, good John. Fatigued, I said. Tie up the knocker. Say I'm sick, I'm dead. The dog star rages. The dog star Sirius, which the ancients associated with madness. Nay, 'tis past a doubt. All Bedlam, all Parnassus is let out. So the madhouse, but also Parnassus, the home of the poets. So mad poets are roaming. Fire in each eye and papers in each hand. They rave, recite and madden round the land. He's been invaded by these terrible poets. What walls can guard me or what shades can hide? This is him at Twickenham, remember? They pierce my thickets, through my grot they glide. They're everywhere. I hate being
Shut the
famous.
windows! It's like the zombie apocalypse, but with poets.
Bad poets. Bad Poet Apocalypse is a film I would watch. So then he sort of asked, why did I become a poet? Why did I let myself in for this? And of course the answer is he's so naturally brilliant, he couldn't help it.
He couldn't help it.
Listen to this. This is when he's a kid. Why did I write? What sin to me unknown dipped me in ink? Lovely phrase for becoming a writer. My parents or my own, as yet a child, nor yet a fool to fame. So before I became famous, I lisped in numbers, for the numbers came. I just couldn't stop.
Oh,
it just happened to me. I couldn't help it.
But he's mourning about being famous there, but I think that's sincere. I think he did write poetry from the first moment.
Oh, I think he did, yeah, he is a natural.
But I think he's also saying, this was the only thing for me. It's the core of me.
Well, it comes natural to me, but B, society has stopped me from even thinking about other things. Anyway, the muse, but served to ease some friend, not wife. So it wasn't my wife. I'm not married to my poetry, but it's helped, it's eased. And then this famous and painful line, to help me through this long disease, my life. And of course, he has suffered with illness his entire life. Anyway, he then gets on to the business of slagging people off. It's Lord Harvey he really goes after. Now, Lord Harvey is a dangerous target, the Queen's favourite, and also Robert Walpole, confidant. So a guy who's absolutely in the centre of power. And he calls him Sporus. Now, that is a dangerous name. Sporus was Nero's catamite. This was this young man who Nero liked. He had him castrated and used to call him his wife. Let Sporus tremble, he says. In other words, here comes the attack. And then Arbuthnot comes in. What? That thing of silk? Sporus, that mere white curd of ass's milk. And it's like outside a pub. So Pope's there, getting ready to go at Lord Harvey. Arbuthnot's got him around the arms.
It's not worth it, Alex.
It's not worth it, Alex. Come off him. Where's my quill? Anyway, so satire or censor, lass, can Sporus feel? Who breaks a butterfly upon a wheel? So it's not worth using all your venom and your power and your skill on this man. I love this so much, I actually splashed the cash and bought a first edition of it. So this is, if you'd gone out in 1735 to buy the new Pope...
This is it?
This is what you would have seen on the street.
Oh, my God. Should you not have white gloves on?
White gloves?
Yeah.
No, it's mine. But you see, it's quite badly cut. The paper's cheap. Shut the door, good John, fatigued. I mean, I know the ink's coming through, but it's a beautiful thing. To me, there's a bit of a holy grail. I know the holy grail was a cop. You know what I mean?
Twickenham. This must have cost you a lot of money.
Not as much as you think.
Why did I write what sin unknown to me dipped me in ink, my parents or my own?
We're back in Twickenham, on the steps of the church where Alexander Pope is buried.
I'll read you a letter from Pope, if I may, at a point where his health begins to go into decline. The nearer I find myself verging to that period of life which is to be labour and sorrow, the more I prop myself upon those few supports that are left me. People in this state are like props indeed. They cannot stand alone, but two or more of them can stand leaning and bearing upon one another. I wish you and I might pass this part of life together. So he says why he can't come to Ireland. The physicians, having told me the weakness of my breath is such as a seasickness might endanger my life. So he asked Swift to come to him. And bring with you your old housekeeper and 2 or 3 servants. I have room for all, a heart for all, and, think what you will, a fortune for all. We could, were we together, contrive to make our last days easy and leave some sort of monument. What 2 friends, 2 wits could be in spite of all the fools in the world. Adieu.
Oh, God.
And of course, they never
met.
They never met again, yeah.
Pope had long suspected he would die first, and despite Swift's own ill health in Ireland, he was proved correct. He died on the 30th of May, 1744. His long disease was finally over.
Here are buried the mortal remains of Alexander Pope. I've never seen this before. And God, this man down here has given me so many hours of pleasure reading his poetry. And his poetry is really the whole story because he was so good. And he was born of the wrong class, of the wrong religion, of the wrong shape, with the wrong politics and the wrong friends, but none of that could stop the mighty force of his brilliant poetry. And the other thing I love about Pope is that he knew, and that's what kept him going. He knew how good he was. When he had all these attacks from various people, lots of horrible remarks about his disability and his religion, there was one opponent called Colley Cibber, who was the poet laureate, but of course a much inferior poet to Pope. And they had a war of words. And Cibber said, "Whatever you say about me, Pope, I will always have the last word." And Pope wrote in response, "Poor Colley, thy reasoning is none of the strongest, for know, the last word is the one that lasts longest." And this man's words, I honestly believe, will last forever. Ah, Alexander.
Swift died a little more than a year later on the 19th of October 1745, but it's unlikely that he knew his friend was dead. He'd been unaware of his surroundings since 1742. In one of his last letters to Pope, his affection was undimmed. "Farewell, my dearest and almost only constant friend. I am ever, at least in my esteem, honour and affection to you, what I hope you expect me to be. Yours, Annecy."
That's so sad.
It's old age. I mean, he got very sick. Of course, you know, age being a shameful thing and illness being a shameful thing, people make this into the revenge for Swift, and, you know, he went mad because he was so clever, or he went mad because he was so vindictive. He's just old. I mean, he dies at 78.
I agree with that, but when a great mind closes down, that's always especially sad, isn't it? Because he was a man of such vigour and life.
Is it sad? Is it not just part of the story? Is it not just about getting old? Everybody gets old and we all act as if, I wouldn't let that happen to me, something so vulgar as being old and needing looked after. But luckily enough, he got the last word, because he'd written his own epitaph several years before. I just love this guy. Verses on the death of Dr. Swift. Do you want to hear it? Come on, I'll show you.
Oh, yeah. I love this poem. It's so brilliant.
"In Pope I cannot read a line without a sigh and wish it mine. When he can in one couplet fix more sense than I can give in 6, it gives me such a jealous fit, I cry, pox take him and his wit." He's just like, you know, even the last thing that's said about him, he wants to mention Pope, and he doesn't want to say, "He's a great guy, I love him." He wants to say, "I'm so jealous of how talented he is."
Yeah, he wants to say he's a great guy, I hate him. And he ends beautifully by saying he's going to give the money to build a mental hospital.
Yeah.
And says, "No nation wanted it so much." So even though he's doing a good turn, he has to have a little dig at Ireland.
So this is his death mask, and it was made just after he died. They put plaster on his face and cast this, and there's a lot, I think this is the original one.
It's great, I think.
Do you?
I love the death mask.
I don't like them. There's no tenderness in the idea of people slathering plaster over your dead face the minute you died.
I feel pretty close to Swift.
Do you? I don't know, I don't like death masks. I think they're weird.
It's a good pet hate. But I think that you can really see what Swift would have been like.
He's real. Yeah. Now, what I'm coming away with, thinking about Swift after all of this, is not just how funny he was, because you can't really aspire to that, you've either got it or you haven't, but how brave he was. He wasn't scared about being cancelled or disapproved of or losing a sponsorship deal or people not talking to him in an author's yurt. He just took on a voice and said what he was thinking. And I'm going to try and harness that and use that in my own work. I mean, it has been life-changing reading him.
Oh, brilliant.
Really, you know, he's amazing.
I think with Pope, I don't think it's very fashionable to like the sort of writing that he writes in a way, because he is like a Swiss watchmaker. It's all about balance and precision and craftsmanship. And also, in continuing that watchmaker theme, he's brilliant at winding people up.
And the venom.
The venom, I love the venom.